Okay, just to be respectful of everyone's time here, we'll get things kicked off. So I just want to thank you today for joining us in this webinar, taking time this afternoon to listen to us here. Just want to be sure before we get started, we are recording this and we will post it on our website as well in a couple days here. And if you could please mute yourself, that would be great. So Shane, can we get the next slide? All right. Today's agenda, just want to walk through it a little bit. The main topic that we're going to be going over is the local legislative authority. However, before we get into that, we haven't talked to folks in a while, and we might have some new folks on the call here today. So we just wanted to do a little recap of what we've done thus far. We've been doing this effort for almost 2 years here now. Exploring the bridge bundling, and we just want to give a little recap to refresh people's minds on things we've gone over. We'll then go into the legislative review, and then we'll go into some federal news, as well as open up for Q&A and discussion. So next slide, please. Okay, so just to give you all a little refresher of who we are. So I'm going to pass it along to Andrew Larson with the Soybean Association. I know he had some words he wanted to share with everyone.
Sure, everyone. Thanks for hopping on this webinar today and continuing to join us for this conversation about how we bring bridge bundling here to Illinois and exploring that concept. Here at the Illinois Soybean Association, we represent 43,000 Illinois soybean farmers, and those farmers use rural bridges, state bridges, federal bridges, and really need that access to quality infrastructure to deliver the product they produce in the fields every year to markets both here in Illinois and abroad. So local bridges do truly play a huge role for the transport of ag goods. And as our role here at the Checkoff organization is to facilitate a discussion and coalition among folks who want to talk about ways to improve our bridge infrastructure in Illinois. Really want to stress on our intent to have this be a conversation and a coalition that helps dive into this topic. We know that many of you on the phone here today either work for organizations that are also looking at ways to improve infrastructure across the state, or actually folks out there who are managing infrastructure assets across the state. And we definitely want to have a continued conversation about how we improve those local bridge assets, and through the bundling process specifically, and building that coalition to have a generative conversation of how we do better for Illinois. So thank you for hopping on with us today, and we really do appreciate you joining us today, and we really do look forward to next steps in conversation. That is a key takeaway and a mission for us out of this conversation here today, is to keep having the conversation with stakeholders about how we can join together and work on behalf of Illinois and bring these bridges to completion. So thank you.
Great. And then from WSP side, so just so if you're not familiar with who we are, we're a national engineering and management consultant firm throughout the nation dealing with a wide variety of infrastructure. However, we do have our advisory services group, which it has a group dedicated to financing and alternative delivery concepts. And that is who's been working on this project. My colleagues, Mark Polston and Deborah Brown, are on, who've been really focusing on this topic, and they'll be going into some of the topics going through this presentation. So if we can get the next slide. So before we get into the activities to date, I do just want to mention that this presentation I'm going to go through and summarize sort of what we've done thus far. However, the focus of the presentation later on will be on the local legislative authority. And I do want to bring to your attention, if you're not aware, IDOT has been exploring bridge bundling, specifically around state structures. They held a couple webinars earlier this year, so I'd encourage you to go to their website and check that out as well. And so when we're talking about bridge bundling here, this is a concept that is used throughout the state to a degree, at least. I know Boone County, for example, has put on RFQ for a bundle of 3 bridges, 2 township and 1 county bridge. So it is happening, and we're just trying to further this conversation. But our focus is in these discussions and looking at bridge bundling is how we bring more jurisdictions together to potentially bundle some bridges. So one of the first things, just to highlight, we had 6 webinars in the last roughly 2 years that we've been working on this initiative. The first webinar was just basic meet and greet, get to know folks, inform them what bridge bundling actually is. And I'll be going into that in a moment here. But the second webinar we had was with the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. And so if you're not familiar, in 2018, the KYTC, so that's the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, announced a list of 1,100 bridges roughly that they wanted to address. There were no interstate or no major river bridges included on this list. 60% of these bridges were county and municipal owned. And so they began a bridge bundling program. As of 2021, 400 projects have been awarded and been worked on, and to date, more and more continuing to get addressed. One thing Kentucky did was to help them with this program, since it was a very large program. They brought along a GEC to assist the Transportation Cabinet in moving this program along. And that GEC was made up of 21 firms with a variety of expertise. And they looked at bridge design, right-of-way acquisition, environmental issues, things of that sort. One thing to highlight from the Kentucky program was their bridge bundles really varied in size. So some bundles were as small as two bridges, and one of the largest ones was 100 bridges, which was bundled as a design build bundle. Another thing just to highlight that Kentucky really brought to our attention that was very important to them was they held several meetings across the state to really sit down with contractors and stakeholders and just hear them out, allow them to provide input on the program that they're going to be putting forward. So that was one of the webinars we had. The next webinar we had was on U.S. government financing, so both U.S. DOT and USDA. So as most of you are aware on this call, funding is limited, and so we got to be creative on ways we can find financing opportunities. And so we had some folks from US DOT come in and present on the TIFIA program. So that's the Transportation Infrastructure Financing and Innovation Program. And so what that program basically did was gave federal credit assistance in the form of direct loans, loan guarantees, and standby lines of credits to surface transportation projects of national and regional significance. Another program that US DOT also has is the Railroad Rehabilitation and Improvement Financing Program. And so what that program does is provide loans and loan guarantees to finance railroad intermodal equipment, but also infrastructure that benefits the public. Within that program, there is no minimum project size or loan request, so it can be as large or as small as needed, and 100% of eligible project costs can be funded. Another agency that we had come in was the USDA, and USDA has a program called the Community Facility Direct Loan Program. The program provides affordable financing to develop essential community facilities in rural areas. This is specific, just to note, this is for rural areas. So the eligible borrowers have to be public bodies and special districts in rural areas not larger than 20,000 residents per the latest US Census data. Within that program, it provided loan repayment terms that may not be longer than the useful life of the facility, or a maximum of 40 years, whichever is less. And one important thing is that the interest rates of these loans were fixed. So every quarter, the USDA looks at interest rates and sets a fixed rate, and for the life of the loan, it stays there on that fixed rate. So those are just some creative ways, sort of thinking outside the box of ways that projects can be funded. Shane, can you back up to the slide we were just on? Thank you. The next webinar we had was the Ohio Bridge Partnership Program. So in 2013, just similarly to what KYTC did, Ohio invested $120 million to repair or replace more than 200 county or city bridges over 3 years. And so Ohio came in, spoke to us, and some of the things they talked about was, when they were developing this program, they really worked directly with the General Assembly, the County Engineers Association, municipalities, a wide variety of folks, just to really tailor this program to be beneficial to all parties involved. Some of the key highlights that they brought up through this, sort of lessons learned that they had, were to keep bridges in close proximity. So contractors, one of the benefits of bridge bundling, as you're aware, is having multiple bridges close by, so it increases efficiencies, whether you're moving equipment or whether you're moving workers. Another thing is they highlighted is they had, once again, just like KYTC, they had a variety of bundle sizes. So bundles varied from 2 bridges all the way up to 20 bridges and they're largest. So it really allowed, all players involved, all types of contractors to participate in this program. And one thing they stressed, just keep it simple. They didn't have anything fancy bridges. It was just to make sure that they're getting to a state of good repair. Excuse me. So the next thing we did was we went over our survey results. So we also did put out a survey in 2020, just the general stakeholder survey, and I'll go into some of those results in the next slides here. However, just some highlights of that. We had over 130 participants from local municipalities, businesses, state agencies, so on and so forth. And it was looking at just gauging everyone's knowledge on the topic and sort of what they view as most important or concerning regarding bridge bundling. So priorities such as, input and priorities such as cost, project delivery, number of bridges, alternative financing, and really just to understand where folks are coming from. And I'll get into those details in a moment here. And so lastly, the last webinar we had was on the contractor experience. So after we had that Ohio DOT presentation, we were getting a lot of feedback from folks saying, hey, it sounds awesome, but everything we're getting is from the DOT perspective. Can we hear from the contractors that actually worked on these bridge bundles? And so we reached out to ODOT and they got us in touch with some Ohio contractors that worked on some of their bundles. And so we had 3 firms that came and presented to everyone. It was a small firm, a medium firm, and a large firm, both union and non-union shops. And some of the things they highlighted was, initially they weren't so familiar with the concept of bridge bundling. However, once they began working in it, it didn't seem too much different from what they already do with ODOT anyway. But once again, the common themes that they just stressed from their experience in these programs was, once again, keep the bundles close by. That's a huge benefit for them. One of the things one of the guys said is it allowed his one foreman to go from one bridge to another. He didn't have to have 2 foremen for the 2 bridges. Keep bridges similar types. So whether we're talking about the type of construction or whether it's going over a railroad or going over waterways, it really allows efficiencies because the workers were already working on a similar type of bridge and, muscle memory, they know what they're doing on that. And another thing they said is allow for all types of bundles. Specifically, some of them highlighted the benefits of having small bundles of 2 or 3 bridges because it did, once again, allow all contractors involved, whether they're small firms or large firms, to participate in that. So when we did those were all the webinars we did to date. And then another thing we did also was we held multiple one-on-one stakeholder interviews. So we just wanted to hear from folks, what are their concerns, whether they be public sector, private sector, labor, you name it. We just wanted to hear them out and get to understand what their thoughts were on bridge bundling. One thing I do want to highlight also is we did do a county engineer survey, which we will, I'll go into some of the results here as well. But we did send out a survey to all county engineers within Illinois, just to once again understand the dynamic, understand their knowledge on bridge bundling. And then we did develop a white paper. So we, based off all the information we gathered, we put out a white paper last year. And so all these materials and recordings of the webinars, if you weren't able to make them, can be found on ilbridgebundling.com. So you can go there and you can see all the video recordings, and we'll be posting this one up there as well. So that's sort of what we've done to date. And then I'm going to go over some of the survey results, as well as speak about bridge bundling at a high level. And then after that, we'll go into the legislation.
We'll go to get to FedEx.
So can we go to the next slide?
Yep, they did.
Okay.
That was different. That wasn't Irvington.
Okay.
Next slide, Shane.
They went out too, right?
And
Okay.
Please remember to mute your microphones, everyone. Getting some feedback here. So a lot of you might be aware of this.
The reference is for the ship numbers. Okay. The ship numbers. So
okay. Getting some feedback here. If we can, Shane, if you can mute some of the folks that are having some feedback, that'd be great. So what is bridge bundling? I know I went at lengths, and now just to let you know briefly what bridge bundling is, if you're not familiar, take advantage of economies of scale by executing a single contract for the replacement, rehabilitation, repair of multiple bridges. And one thing, this allows for a significant number of bridges to be quick fixed quicker and less expensively than through traditional methods. So that's just sort of a you know, Spark Notes version of what bridge bundling is. And yeah, can we go to the next slide, Shane? Okay, and I just want to sort of give you a highlight of where we stay at, or where we sit at here in Illinois. So Illinois has roughly, you know, 27,000 bridges throughout the state. 1 in 7 bridges are in need of repair, and roughly 9% of the bridges have elements that are in poor or worse condition, and that's per the standards of US DOT. Additionally, we do have over close to 1,200 bridges that posted restrictions on the size and weight limits that which vehicles can go on them. So once again, that can be a detriment to you know, economic development and the ag community as a whole. So next slide, please. And here's just a little more detailed in of those you know, roughly 27,000 bridges. And as you can see, 2/3 of the bridges within the state are county or municipal owned. So a large portion of the bridges in the state are locally owned. So there's just some totals, and we also have the condition: good, fair, and poor. And once again, this is per the US DOT. Next slide, please. Great. So earlier I mentioned we had a stakeholder survey. I know many of you might have participated on that. So just to give you a little refresher, we had we had 126 survey participants. And some of the things we heard were the largest obstacles of bridge bundling in Illinois, people thought were bureaucracy. So the bureaucracy would be an obstacle, funding, and then it's never been done before, and followed by politics and existing laws. Some of the top priorities that were mentioned were cost, was first, number of bridges, speed, and alternative financing. And once again, you can view all of the more detailed survey results, because there was many questions we had, on the website ilbridgebundling.com. Next slide, please. Okay. And then in May of 2021, we also wanted to reach out to the county engineers specifically and ask them about, you know, their knowledge and you know, gain their feedback from bridge bundling. So we had roughly 1/3 of the county engineers respond, so it's not too bad. And you know, some of the things we asked were, have you ever bundled any scopes in any other projects within your county? And 1/3 said they did, 2/3 said they didn't. And in terms of how familiar they county engineers are, it was sort of in the middle is where we saw most people land, with 1 being the least and 5 being the most familiar. So we saw folks having a wide variety of knowledge, and that's what we're doing here today, is continuing educating folks and you know keeping them informed on what bridge bundling is. And then one of the other questions we did want to highlight is, you know, what would the level of support for pursuing bridge bundling be? And where we had strongly or somewhat support was 70%. We did have 30% that were strongly or somewhat opposed. And so we did also add open-ended comments to gain feedback from folks. And Shane, if you can go to the next slide. Excuse me. And so we wanted to see, you know, what were some of these, why someone might be opposed, or what their concerns were. And these were some of the common themes we heard. Funding. So as everyone on this call is probably aware, there's a finite amount of funding, and so there's a need for increased funding. However, you know, we can't necessarily snap our fingers and have that happen. So one of the things where bridge bundling can benefit this is, you know, bundling is a tool that can be used to make efficiencies that can make bridges cheaper. So, you know, if instead of 1 bridge, you know, you have 1 cost, you can get 1.8 bridges for the cost of 2. So you can really, you know, you can gain efficiencies, and there's going to be ways that bridge bundling can assist in this funding effort. It's obviously not going to solve all the issues of funding, but it is a tool that, if instituted properly, could have a benefit and have some cost savings where we can get, you know, more bang for our buck, so to speak. Another comment we heard from a lot of the county engineers, and this was one of the ones that came up a lot, was you know, that there was a concern that some small contractors might need disadvantage from bridge bundles, because I think a lot of folks have some not well understood understanding, think of bridge bundle, I think of, that KYTC 100 bundle. But that's not the case. One thing we saw from Ohio, from Kentucky, was that there were bundles of 2 to 3 bundles where their contractors could participate in. And that was when we went through with the contractor experience. That's one thing they told us, is that, make sure you continue, if you're going and doing bridge bundles, to include smaller bundles as well, because then all can participate. And then the last item we heard was the administrative and bureaucracy challenges, and that there may be challenges when cross jurisdictions in terms of hurdles for funding, as well as bonding authority, things of that sort. And that's a valid concern. That's why we're here today. We're going through, we're continuing moving on this issue, and just seeing how we can come up with solutions, because this is going to be a hurdle that we will have to overcome. And sort of what Mark's going to go into with the legislative authority sort of speaks to some of that. He'll provide some of the existing authorities as limitations, as well as potential solutions. And so this is an area that it's hit it spot on. More work's going to have to be done. And that's why we're having here this conversation with everyone collaboratively to sort of walk through how we can achieve some of those hurdles. So Mark, I'll pass it along to you, and
Okay.
you can go into the next slides.
All right, thanks, Adam. Good afternoon again, everyone. Mark Polston from WSP. We have the last few months really focused more of the effort on assessing the legal framework for bridge bundling, particularly bridge bundling to be done by units of local government in Illinois. And Shane, if you'll move to the next slide, we've engaged Ansel Glink. Megan Mack, who we've been working with, is on the line as well. And Ansel Glink is a full service law firm in Illinois, working on a lot of different local and state government issues in particular. And they have provided us with some really, really key legal research, really digging deep into the statutes to assess, what can we do for sure, what maybe could we do, what are some of the hurdles, but yeah, just what is that existing authority, what are the limitations, and what kind of solutions do we need moving forward. So we'll go right into that. If at any time you have a question, feel free to jump in, or I'll kind of pause here at the end of this few slides that we're gonna look at together. So the answer to the question, is bridge bundling by local government in Illinois permitted under Illinois law? And the broad answer is yes. The Intergovernmental Cooperation Act gives, as probably a lot of you know, gives very broad powers to units of local government in the state of Illinois. And if we'll talk about some things, some other similar type efforts and issues that we've looked at that we know are going on, that we can look at as examples of other local government activities that come out of this Intergovernmental Cooperation Act authority. So that is the broad answer, that units of local government can get together and form agreements to jointly construct and maintain bridges. So looking a little deeper on the next slide, we can see that this usefulness, or this broad authority, is somewhat limited by other areas of the law that are outside of the scope of the Intergovernmental Cooperation Act and local practices within Illinois. So one complicating factor is it's a pretty hierarchical way that Illinois allocates jurisdictional authority for roads and bridges. There is certain authority granted to municipalities, certain authority to townships, certain authority to counties. So there's definitely some differences in what those different types of government can do that would complicate those entities getting together to to do a bridge bundling program. So this hierarchy gives rise to some other questions. So things like, how can the governments work up and down that hierarchy? How can they finance together? How can they work together and finance things together? How do they together navigate public contract bidding requirements? And that obviously is a very kind of potentially very difficult situation. How do you navigate those different bidding requirements? And just on those finance related issues, there is not a clear path for different types of local government units to across themselves or among themselves agree on how to finance projects, because as the last point on the slide indicates, there is authority in the highway code to for municipalities and townships to work together on a single bridge when a portion of that bridge falls within that municipality or within that township. So if Township A has a bridge that connects to Township B, it's very clear under the statutes that Township A and B can work together to rebuild or build a new structure between those two entities, but not so clear as if you were bundling and you may have projects that are not within each of the involved or all of the involved entities. So if you had two involved townships on that bridge, but then you had another bridge that connected Township B and Township C, it's not exactly clear what authority Township A would have in coming together with those other townships to do a bundle. So just trying to think ahead, like what are some solutions to some of these issues? We've identified some areas of potential statutory clarification that would facilitate bridge bundling. So one, just based on what I was just talking about, there could be statutory authority to fund and build bridge projects outside of, one particular entity's jurisdiction. There could be an elimination of bond caps or an increase of bonding authority for non-home rule units of government for these types of projects. There could be new bridge bundling authority put within the Intergovernmental Cooperation Act itself. So while we have found that there is that general authority under the Intergovernmental Cooperation Act to do bridge bundling, there could be something specific put in there, as has been done for some other types of issues that I'll talk about in a minute, that make it really clear and unquestionable that this is statutorily authorized. And then yet another potential statutory clarification would be to eliminate bidding requirements for units of local government. So loosening the restrictions they have on what those procurement processes have to look like. So some, as we say, real world examples, and this goes back to what I was saying about, the Intergovernmental Cooperation Act giving that general authority for units of local governments to come together for different types of efforts. Two of those examples that already happen in Illinois are governmental self-insurance pools and the regional land bank authorities. So on the land bank authority example, you may be familiar with those. Those are public authorities that are created for often for redeveloping property to get property back into a more productive use. And so these units of local government can come together and form those land banks to get land back into productive use. There's no specific statutory power for land bank authorities. It derives from that very general Intergovernmental Cooperation Act authority. And those have been successfully upheld by Illinois courts. And there's also opinions from the Attorney General's office that has validated these authorities. Looking at governmental self-insurance pools, these pools allow local units of government or local public entities to pool their resources and risk to provide themselves protection, in case of some kind of event or hardship that would put them in a bad fiscal situation. They can band together and help protect themselves. And the Supreme Court held a few decades ago that governmental self-insurance pools were a valid exercise of intergovernmental cooperation under the Intergovernmental Cooperation Act. But what did happen, and it seemingly was not legally necessary because it had already been found that there was this general authority. The legislature did add a new subsection to the Intergovernmental Cooperation Act to specifically authorize self-insurance pools. So that is an option, again, that bridge bundling could follow to do what governmental self-insurance pools did, or what was done to benefit those in 1990. So just to tie that all together, local units of local government are getting together under the Intergovernmental Cooperation Act authority to, act in their mutual self-interest to achieve various ends. And certainly bridge bundling could be, added to that practice. So moving into the next slide, we're going to look a little bit at federal news. I'm going to pause right here just while that is kind of fresh on everybody's mind, hopefully. Just if there are any questions, feel free to put up your hand or speak up. We'll also have time at the end probably to answer questions. I think we're going to be able to reserve some time for that. Okay. Well, it doesn't seem like we have any questions at the moment. Deborah, I'm going to turn it over to you at this point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. So as you are probably aware, last fall, Congress signed into law a new transportation authorization bill, creating new programs and funding opportunities for infrastructure, including transportation. Initially, the bill was referred to as the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or the IIJA. Now that it's been signed into law, it's referred to as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill, Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and the acronym is the BIL. So sometimes it gets confusing between it being a bill previously and now being referred to as the BIL. So here we just want to highlight a few relevant provisions from the BIL that may also help facilitate bridge bundling activities at the federal level. So among those provisions, we have the Bridge Investment Competitive Grant Program. This program specifically calls out the eligibility of bundled bridge projects. Individual bridges within a bundle do not have to be necessarily on the same system. They don't have to have the same federal share. In evaluating these grant applications under this program, the decision makers at DOT will consider bundling as a project benefit and evaluate the extent to which bundling generates cost savings and other benefits as compared to traditional procurement and delivery approaches. Another relevant provision is found in Section 11-132 of the BIL, which creates the Rural Surface Transportation Grant Program. Eligible applicants under this program include states, regional planning organizations, local governments, and multi-jurisdictional groups, combinations of some of the state and or local government entities. Eligible projects under this program include highways or bridges that provide or increase access to an agricultural, a commercial, or intermodal facility that supports the economy of a rural area. Such eligible projects include bundles of 2 or more of these such projects, as long as they're included in the STIP. And lastly, what we want to point out is there is the Rural and Tribal Infrastructure Advancement Effort under the Build America Bureau's Rural and Tribal Assistance Pilot Program. Eligible applicants under this program include local governments outside an urbanized area of 158,000 in population. This program authorizes the Build America Bureau to provide eligible entities access to financial, technical, and legal assistance to evaluate opportunities for private financing and project bundling opportunities. So this is great news. We've heard for a number of years there has been a push at USDOT to provide more support and assistance for rural areas and needing to address critical transportation needs. And now we see, this has a lot of these programs have been signed into the law. So hopefully in combination with some of the authorities and opportunities available at the state level, you might see opportunities to combine with federal authorizations to put together a comprehensive approach to delivering bundled bridges and improve bridge replacement opportunities throughout the state. And so I will turn it back to Adam or Jamie for next steps.
This one up here, Deborah. And I apologize, I'm still trying to get my camera on here. So we just did a lot of conversing here, a lot of talking, a lot of presenting, and kind of going back to what Andrew was saying at the beginning, this initiative really started with the intent of being a coalition. And so we really want to get some feedback from you all. Adam gave a very robust overview of what the previous webinars covered, what some of those survey results told us. Mark walked through the local legislative authority that we sort of uncovered and solidified in our minds with the help of Ansel Glink, and Deborah just walked through some of the federal program assistance available for bridge bundling. So what I'd like to do now is really talk with you all about next steps. On the screen, you see some of the things that we think we should be doing next. We'd like to take what we learned about the local legislative authority, the local powers, and we'd like to talk more with the county engineers about that. We'd also like to work through some presentations and conversation with the Illinois Municipal League, continue to do some of the outreach and build on some of the outreach we've done with labor, and then carry that information and that feedback up to state legislators to see if there is interest in doing more to solidify authority around local bridge bundling. But I'd like to hear from you all today too. What do you think we should be doing next? Are these the appropriate next steps? Do the folks on the phone today, many of you look like I recognize most of your names. You've been on these webinars in the past. You've been involved in this process over the course of the last 2 years or so. I do see some new names today as well. Are these the appropriate next steps? Do you feel there is interest in continuing to explore options for local government authorities to potentially take on more robust bundling programs than what they may be currently doing within their own jurisdictions? So I'll just pause there because, as I said, we did a lot of presenting, and would really like to hear any questions and any thoughts that you all have about next steps.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
This is Kyle Godar, County Engineer, Calhoun County. And I previously worked for a construction company out of St. Louis and put together bids on what was an 800 bridge package and then a 554 bridge package the second go around over in Missouri from MoDOT. And so I was largely involved in that, bidding those, the first with the big bids as they were put together. And then what ended up happening is Kiewit Trailer United formed a team and they bid and got the job. And then they split those 554 bridges up into smaller packages of 4, 5, 6 bridges and bid them out. And then as a smaller contractor that was part of a big team putting those together, we did not get the job, but we ended up building, I think, 17 of those bridges by bidding out those small packages when they rebid those out. The biggest cost savings there, I think, is standardization of the bridge designs. So they basically put together a set of standards, like standard details of bridges, a certain set of box beam dimensions, certain set of abutment dimensions, and all the center piers were all caps on steel shell piling. And it was basically cookie cutter designs. So those 500 bridges almost all looked identical. And when they went out for bids on those 554 bridges for materials, the main bidding team bought all the piling and bought all the beams under 2 massive contracts. And then when we came in as a smaller contract, because like you said, we worked our area that we're used to working in, and we bid bridges that were packaged in that area. So we were bouncing back and forth in a single county, for instance, working on bridges. We just have to tell them when we were going to be ready for piling, when we were going to be ready for beams, and have a schedule to them 2 weeks in advance. And then they would send them out to us. So they had a massive stockpile of piling and somewhere that they were shipping that stuff out. So that's where their biggest cost savings was from the material suppliers. You know, you have a precaster bidding beams. They build one set of forms and pour 500 beams out of one set of forms that are all the same. So that's where your biggest cost savings probably comes from. So if IDOT can come up with a standard set of bridge plans like that, it'd be a lot easier for, say counties, for instance, like ourselves, to maybe at a district level put together our own packages, something maybe along those lines. But until you get a massive contract for a material supplier out there, I don't know how much cost savings there is. The thing I see in Illinois versus Missouri is that every set of bridge plans is different, it seems like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this concept of standardizing the bridge specs and materials has come up on some previous webinars and conversations as well. So thank you for bringing it back up again. That does seem to be a message that we've heard sort of consistently throughout some of this process. So good to kind of reiterate that again. Deborah, did you have any other experiences that you might want to chime in on in terms of where?
That's the advantage of being old now. You can fucking do shit like this. Fathom.
Sorry, folks. Somebody's still not on mute. But Deborah, in other places where we've seen some of the other entities doing bridge bundling experience cost savings in different ways that aren't just materials based.
No, I mean, there are some savings that can also be generated by acceleration of the actual delivery and completion of some bridge projects rather than, waiting for separate lettings of individual bridges. Also, there was another reference in the gentleman's comments about just the massive size of some of the packages that were initially bid out, and how one of the larger contractors was able to swoop in and actually be more competitive in winning those larger packages. And that's one of the things that we've heard as a particular area of focus. And there are opportunities to avoid, having the large size packages, and ensure that opportunities are created for local contracting firms, smaller contractors, because this should be an opportunity similar to the initial titling of the new bill, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. We want to make sure that jobs are made available by virtue of getting these projects out on the street and in packages that provide for economies of scale and also provide a benefit to local workers and local contracting firms.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Heard some background noise there, so there might be some sidebar conversations going on. Okay, well, coming back to these next steps, does this seem to make sense to those of you on the phone today, that we take kind of what we've learned here through our most recent education process, which again was on the local legislative authority for doing bundling, and we continue to converse with county engineers and municipalities about this? Okay, hearing nothing, we'll take that as at least not a that these are not bad ideas. So we do realize that this can be a sensitive topic, and it's is something that people are still trying to grasp and understand really the details of how you might administer programs like this. And these questions of, how much efficiency and cost savings do we really gain? These are things that, continue to be fresh in folks' minds, which makes sense. But so we'd be very happy if you'd like to discuss any of this sort of on the side or provide any additional feedback on the side. We'd be very happy to have some sidebar conversations as well. We do want to make sure that we are continuing to move in a direction, doing additional research throughout 2022 that makes sense and is adding value to this conversation and truly is helping to educate people about the potential for this. So please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us at any time about this. Are there any other closing remarks, Adam, that you were intending to make, or anything anyone else would like to add today?
The one thing I would just want to let everyone know is please go to the website ilbridgebundling.com. We have all our former previous webinars on there, as well as the PowerPoint slides and notes as well. So there's a lot more information that I couldn't go in through. Those webinars are very long. So feel free to go there. We'll also be posting this webinar on there as well. So if there's anyone else you want to share this with, I encourage you, share that link, share this with anyone you may know. And we're just trying to continue this conversation moving forward. So, and thanks for coming on tonight.
Looks like we may have a question.
Yeah,
Adam.
there's one question in the chat. Adam, does IDOT have bridge bundling results or examples? That's from Justin with Boone County.
Justin, yeah, as Adam mentioned, we know IDOT's done a couple of webinars and had some other conversations on their own. They started their outreach and sort of stakeholder feedback sessions late summer, early fall last year. I don't know if anyone is on the line today from IDOT who might be able to speak to maybe next steps in what IDOT is exploring for bridge bundling. Some of the IDOT folks. I haven't seen results just yet. I just know that their outreach efforts were underway as of late last summer and or early fall. So I think there's probably still a little more to come on that.
Jamie, this is Todd Bain from with ISA. I know IDOT in one of their webinars said that they were hoping to have contracts out for bridge bundling programs in the spring of 22. So we're probably a little premature, but we should anticipate seeing something in the next 3 to 6 months.
Thanks, Todd. Thank you, Todd. Any other questions, discussion?
I have a question. Sorry, I'm kind of behind the curve here, but so I'm taking by this conversation that Illinois has not participated or have funding or bundling available just yet, that they're still in the process of working through the issues and legislative issues with that. Is that correct?
That is our understanding, yes. But given the fact that IDOT did start a process of kind of talking with stakeholders about the potential for bridge bundling on state bridges last year, that is also, just to reiterate, part of the reason why we shifted this conversation here a little more towards the local level over the course of the last 6 months. But yes, that is correct. It seems IDOT is still kind of working through what they might be able to do and want to do on bundling.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Justin has another comment. 23 USC 124 is no longer available. Do we have that statute on one of the previous slides? We could pull it up again.
Yeah, that was a yeah, that's an added provision in the IIJA.
Yeah, that's a totally new. I think 124 is completely new.
Yes.
Okay, Justin, any further comments on that in terms of what you meant by no longer available? Did you hear it went away? Good. All right. Any final questions, comments? All right. Well, as Adam said, thank you very much for joining today. We do appreciate your attention on this, and again, are certainly willing to have any sidebar conversations anyone is interested in. Adam, we'll be sending the materials out, I assume, from today?
Yep. So it'll take a couple days for us to get this uploaded onto the website, and then we'll share that with everyone as well, the links.
All right. Well, Happy New Year, everyone. Thanks again for joining, and we will talk with you all soon. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.